Hello and welcome to Life in Recovery podcast, episode 82 with me, John Loxley. I hope you're doing well. Today's episode is with Trevor Tacey, who is a EFT therapist and matrix re-imprinting practitioner. So he uses various techniques to treat anxiety, stress and depression, and he specialises in trauma resolution and treating addictions. Now, Trevor has been in recovery for over 22 years and he is an advocate of 12-step fellowships, but has kind of moved in a new direction, which is really, really interesting. And I really enjoyed speaking with him. I hope that you enjoy listening to it as much as I enjoyed speaking with Trevor. And just before we jump into the podcast, just a quick reminder that you can support the podcast financially by going to www.patreon.com/lifeinrecovery, and that'll just help me cover the monthly costs such as the website host and my Zoom subscription. So anything that you can afford would be very, very much appreciated. And without further ado, I give you Trevor Tacey.
I grew up in a place called Newark in Nottinghamshire. I'm still there as it happens. So it's only a small town. So I made quite a big impact in my small town. But some years ago, not these days. But yeah, I'll get started now if you want to. Do you want me to get started now?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Or do you want to have a chat a bit first?
No, get started. Yeah? No, it's good. It's a good intro.
I mean, I started... basically... I was born in Newark in Nottinghamshire, and my early childhood, I talk about this, actually I found a lot more out about myself while I was writing that book. You know, the thing was that, my earliest recollection was, I could have been no more, I was less than 2 anyway, and I can remember being out in the snow. My parents lived in a little terrace houses joined together, and not everybody had a television, so the next door neighbour had a television, and they'd nipped in thinking we were, I was asleep. I was the youngest at the time. I was the only child at the time, and I'd woke up while they were in the next door, which was, it's nothing now, but at the time, I can remember how terrified I was being stood out in the snow and nobody about in pitch darkness. So that was a beginning for me. But I seemed to be in trouble all through my childhood. When I went to school, I went to a Catholic school. My mother was Catholic, but my dad was Protestant. I was also in trouble with the nuns. There were nuns here who were quite cruel, to be truthful. And eventually, through my behaviour, we had the normal, scraps in the playground and all that, but I took it a step further, and we had a sandpit with and where we used to, when it flooded, we used to float things on it and things, and I saw somebody bent over it, and I suddenly had this inclination. It'd be a good idea, to push him in the what I did do, without any second thoughts. And anyway, I got expelled from that school, and nothing really changed when I went to the next school. I thought a new start, new school would be different, but it wasn't. So soon had the head teacher chase me around the desk and that with a cane and one thing and another. I've got the remnants of a cough, so I'm hoping it's not going to interfere too much.
Not the COVID, is it?
So sorry, no, it isn't. I had to check up. I had to go and check it out just to make sure, because I've had it a couple of weeks. But anyway, so the childhood, the school thing was like. I never got on, I never really did well at school. I wasn't interested, to tell you the truth. I was more interested in what happened after school than at school. When I was into my fishing and with my mates and things like that. But as I grew up, I had 2 brothers. Alan, who was 2 years younger than me, Alan, who's 5 years younger than me, and Graham, who's 2 years younger than me. And when I was about when I was 12 years old, we'd moved from, well, I was getting into trouble before that. They moved into a pub. They took over a pub, my parents did. So there were 3 of us were at the pub. And I was like stealing money from underneath the counter and stuff like that and hiding it, and because I was getting there was that much bullying going off at school, I just found that it was, if I had some money, I could like buy sweets and sort of buy my attackers off, like, with a bit of money. But so that was part of it. But eventually we left that pub and we moved to out of town into the countryside, a place called Lincoln Road. And while I was there, over a summer holidays, we were fishing down a place called Crankley Point, which is near to that end of town where we were, and I was in charge of the 2 younger brothers. And this particular day, we'd been fishing the day before. On this day, my brother couldn't find his fishing reel. Graham, this is the middle one, and so he didn't come. And then when I got down to the riverside and started putting our rods and that up, me and Alan and a friend of ours, I found his reel in my basket, and I was, sort of umming and ahhing whether to go back and fetch him, and I didn't. And then when I got back, there was a police car outside the house. So first thing that came to mind, I was trying to think what I got up to, in the previous days, whether it was anything to do with me. But when I got to the house, I found out my brother was doing an errand for my mum that day, and had been hit by a lorry and killed instantly. He was 10 years old. So there was all that, there was all that to deal with, and I'll have to keep an eye on the time. There was all that to deal with, and then we left that house. My mum sort of turned to drink a little bit, but I think she lost her faith to a certain extent. I don't think she went to churches often after that, and anyway, we moved back into town again, into another house nearer the town centre. And while I was there, we used to fool around in this malt kilns. It's like where they store all the malt at that time, for I imagine it was for brewing and stuff, because we had a couple of breweries around us. So they had quite a few different types of things that they were storing in this room and in this big warehouse, and we used to go in and make dens in there. And anyway, it's not long after my brother was killed, and this guy who was in there groomed me and sexually abused me while I was in there. Now, I couldn't tell anybody. I was too ashamed to tell my mum and dad. I just think I'd get into more trouble, so I never told anybody about it. But all through this, my dad was really violent. He was a violent person, and I was always getting beat, with a belt and that. He had a belt that he used to use, and even when he used to go away from home, he worked away from home, worked on the power stations. Even when he came back, my mum would give him a list of things that I've been up to during the week, and I'd get a beating for that. And on this one particular time, and he was violent to my mum as well. Earlier on, when we were at the pub, I can remember times when he sat on her, and I was like powerless to do anything about it. And, as like I don't know, 10-year-old having thoughts of, I can't wait till I'm bigger and I'm going to, I'm going to make you pay for this, and they're not good thoughts, I don't think, for a 10-year-old. But that's the sort of thoughts that were going off in my mind. And the same thing was when I got older, and I was, I was getting these beatings were getting a bit more intense. And at one time, he was lashing out with this. He started using the buckle end because the other end wasn't doing any, wasn't really having much effect on me. He was using the buckle end of the belt. It's like a big brass buckle on it. And he was incensed this one day because I used to wind him up as well. And he hit the ceiling in the kitchen and it broke the buckle, and he tore a wound right down the middle of my back, and he carried on, and it was my mum had to get in between him and me to stop him. And excuse me. So yeah, I had plenty of stuff to work with, knowing as my life was developing in that family atmosphere. There was lots of stuff going on. And so I left school when I was 15. I went straight into an apprenticeship. It lasted about 2 years, maybe 3, because I'd started using drugs by the time I was 15 and a half, 16. I mean, it was the 60s. Everybody was doing it. That's my excuse anyway. But so amphetamines were about, and so I just took to it like a duck to water, I mean, as soon as I started taking drugs, I just felt like all this crap that I was carrying about me had been lifted. But it didn't, it just started to, things started to get more difficult at home. I was missing a lot of the time, and I didn't know where I was. And by the time I was 18. I smashed my dad's car up and had to leave. I was borrowing my dad's car while he was working away, and one day I had an accident and wrote it off, so I had to leave home before he got back from work, and went into live at a place called Worksop. It was a mining village. And while I was out there, I had a girlfriend from that area, and I got her pregnant, and I went back home. Eventually went back home. My mum, the true Catholic, there was no ifs and buts about it. Oh, that's it, you'll have to get married. That was it. We're bundled to the church and married off. And I had 2 children during that marriage, and that's when my amphetamine use started to increase. I hooked up with a couple of guys from Lincoln, and we started breaking into chemists, and that's what I was doing on a regular basis for quite a few years. I guess, my first conviction was in 1966, but it was more for shoplifting and driving offences and that. Not having a licence, or just small things, but it was slowly escalating. And that marriage, it lasted about 2.5 years. 2 children involved, both ended up in care as unfortunately as a result of the breakdown of the marriage. But by 1972, I'd been arrested a couple of times for breaking into chemists and got probation or suspended sentences. But it was just getting worse, and I went to Crown Court, Nottingham Crown Court, in 1972, and they gave me what was known as a condition of residence, which is, I'd never heard of it before, but I was just didn't want to go to prison. And so they sent me, it was like a probation order where they sent me to a treatment centre, and they couldn't keep me in that treatment centre for more than a year. And so, I jumped at the chance, and went there. I had no intentions of not stopping using. I was not. I was just blagging it really, and just get out as soon as I could. But during that time there, the reason I was sent there in the first place was this is how bad it had got. I was charged with breaking into 14 chemists 13 days after getting a suspended sentence for the same sort of thing. So they just, I think the judge was just shaking his head. He couldn't work it out, so he sent me to a treatment centre to see if that would sort me out. So anyway, I did it. I did what I needed to do. I just dawdled along until they let me out. But the marriage had about broken down by then. I went back to my wife, but I broke into a chemist within about a month, of getting out of that treatment centre, maybe less. And ended up, the marriage broke down. I ended up in prison doing my first prison sentence. And even in there, you know what I mean? I was like, I decided that the marriage was over at that point. I think she tried to come to see me a couple of times. I refused to even try one of those social family meetings, and I wouldn't have it, you know what I mean? I was really angry. I had a massive chip on my shoulder, you know what I mean? And I was 100% knew what I was going to be doing when I got out of that prison. Yeah, I nearly lost all my remission. You know, I was on riots, involved in riots and all sorts, you know what I mean, and lost most of my remission. In fact, they offered me parole at the end of it. I think I had about a few weeks left where they could parole me, but I was that sure of what I was going to be doing, you know what I mean. I refused the parole, you know what I mean. I just says no, I don't want it. And I waited until my sentence was over so I could go back out and do what I needed to do, and that's how my life was going. You know, it was going really downhill. You know, no, I had 14 convictions. I've had 4 prison sentences. I've had 3 suspended sentences and that condition of residence, you know, but that don't count all the time. You know, I mean, if you added it all up, it was quite. You could perhaps double that, because the times I'd been on remand for 3 or 4 months and got probation or a suspended sentence, or, you know, not guilty on a few of them as well. You know, I mean, it's probably doubled those sentences. So after my first taste of prison, I moved to Bournemouth. I think I've moved to Bournemouth. I think it was more my mum's idea than anything, because I've gone back to my parents' house, and you know, but I had loads of stuff going on. People were looking for me, and you know, I was stood in their bedroom at one time with a knife in my hand because somebody was, you know, I mean, I thought somebody was coming up the passageway after me. Made them really ill. She got me. My dad was on the power station work, so he got me a job in Poole Power Station. So the next thing I know, I've got a suitcase with a few clothes in it. She bummed me a bit of money and stuck me on a train to Poole, other end of the country. But while I was in Bournemouth, I wasn't using the same as I was. I've been breaking, you know, I broke into a few chemists when I was there, but I was down there for about 5 years. And never really, I never got a prison sentence while I was down there. You know, I got a few charges, but what happened was, you know, things started to come on top for me. All these things from my past were coming to the surface, and this one day I found myself I wanted to commit suicide. I had my mate with me as well. So I decided I was going to commit suicide, and I had this like thought in my head, you know what I mean, that I was going to die this junkie, and there was going to be a little bit in the corner of the bottom of a page somewhere, you know what I mean, about me. I passed away and been found in a bedsit or something like that, and I thought, well, if I'm going to go, you know what I mean, I'm going to go out with a bang. So I got this reporter on, so I was going to throw myself off his building. I told this reporter I was going to do it. This guy was with me, and he tried. Eventually, he wouldn't wear it. You know, he got so far up, and then this reporter, his bottle went, and he went back to the office. But I ended up going out onto the street, and I found a bus that was just picking some passengers up, and I put my head under the back wheel of the bus, and it actually started. And some guy saw me. I never saw him, but he must have jumped out, grabbed me, and pulled me out just as the bus started, and he took some scalp off the side of my head. Yeah, and I didn't thank him by, you know what I mean, I think I called him everything from a pig to a dog, you know what I mean, for doing it, because I just wanted it to be all over. I just had enough. So I got locked up for that, and then they let me out when things quietened down. But yeah, eventually I left Bournemouth and ended up back in New York again. Got married in 1984. I'm still with that wife now. I've just celebrated 37 years, so she stuck through a few years of my addiction, and thankfully, and things have worked out since then. But I went into treatment in while I was with her in 1997, my brother, my wife had gone to my brother and said to her, look, things have got that bad. He says, I'm just waiting, because I was going to work then. I was working on the stations, but then I was like going straight to the dealer's house and using crack and heroin and smoking crack and that, and then coming back at the early hours of the morning, and I wasn't washing or anything, and then dragging myself off to work again with a bit of methadone. That's probably just to keep me going at work. And but she could see, where I was going, and she didn't have anybody to go to, and she couldn't go to her mum. So she went to my brother. I'd used with my brother for a while. He'd been in Bournemouth for me at the time, the Alan. They're on 5 years younger than me. And she said to him, I'm just waiting for a knock on the door. They're going to tell me he's either OD'd or he's piled his car on his journey back, And I never knew about this until later, until I got into recovery. But anyway, so in 1997, after we've been married 12 years, I eventually got into a 12-step treatment program. And I ain't got a clue what it was, but I was desperate at that time. I had been desperate for a while, but I'd never been able to stop on my own. I'd get a few days and I'd be back at it again, and just couldn't do it. And so I went through this treatment centre about 6 weeks. A funny thing happened, actually, I talked about it in my book a bit, like divine intervention. There was a time, when earlier on in our marriage, when I really wanted to stop. And I used to have running dogs, I used to go out doing a thing called lamping. I don't know whether you know what it is. You just use a lamp, target rabbits, and then the dogs go after them, and catch them. And I'd go on my own because I wanted that solitude, that being complete darkness, just my dogs. It was my some sort of respite from what was going off around me. And I remember this one night. It was a moonless night, and I was in the middle of this field, and I switched my lamp off, and I just found myself, sort of on my knees with my head in my hands on the ground. The dogs were like fussing around me, and I was just in floods of tears. Because I just didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know how I was going to get out of this, and and I just. And I was starting to feel, all the guilt of how I've neglected my family and my kids. We had 3 children, a boy, 2 girls, and and it was like it was all on top of me, and it was like I just didn't know how I was going to get out of it, and it didn't. But I prayed something I didn't know. I didn't believe in God, But I prayed that night for something to happen. And eventually this happened. She went to see my brother, and he knew somebody had been through a 12-step program, and he rang me up and he asked me if I was interested, and I said, yeah, I'll try anything. I don't care what it is. And so he started the ball rolling, and I ended up in there. And then this lady called Benta, who was in charge there, she had to get the funding off the doctor, so she managed to get the funding. I don't know how she did it. And then she rang me up one day, and just before this happened, I was still going to my dealers, and I was doing a run for him, and my car broke down, and I went to shove it. I was on my own, and I put my back against the car with the handbrake off and tried to shove it into the side of the road because it was on a bend. It was dangerous, and I slipped and I ruptured my Achilles tendon. I didn't know it at the time, but that's what I'd done. I ended up with a plaster on, a full plaster. So, and I just started work on a power station, one of the first to be set on. And and that was my bread and butter, I'd do 6 months on a power station, and that had set me up for the rest of the year. And I'd just do a bit of, just a bit of work on the side to make me money up. And so that's what I relied on. And so I started this, and then I ruptured my Achilles tendon, and I got a sick note for 6 weeks. And then I was sat at home with a sick note for 6 weeks. And I got a phone call, and this mentor rang me. She said, I've got some good news and bad news, because it was a long waiting list to get into this place. She says, I says, well, what's the good news? She says, I've got a bed for you. I says, well, what's the bad news then? She says, you've got to come tomorrow. It was like, fuck's sake, I don't believe it. You know what I mean? I says, that ain't bad news. You know, I didn't know how I was going to get here, but anyway, so, you know what I mean? I'd had this slip. I'd never had a plaster on me. I'd done all sorts of things, never had a plaster. I had this plaster on where I couldn't drive, couldn't go to work, and a 6 week sick note. I didn't have to explain to my boss, you know what I mean, where I was going. And the treatment was for 6 weeks, so you know, it all came together at the right time. Yeah, it was amazing. It was to me anyway. So yeah, I went in there, and you know, I mean, I went in. I was so desperate to get in there, and then when I get in there, you know what I mean, I'm acting like Jack the Lad and that, and you know what I mean. Oh, I could get a bit of this and a bit of that in if you want, you know what I mean, and all that bollocks. You know what I mean? And I don't know whether I'm supposed to swear on it.
All right. Definitely right.
But yeah. So, you know what I mean? I was like, give me head a shake. You know, it was like, what you doing? You know what I mean? You were so desperate to get in here. Now you're playing games. And it was like, you know what I mean? And then I started to buckle down, and I didn't understand about the 12 steps. I did what I had to do. You know what I mean? I was going to NA meetings. They told me about getting a sponsor. I was working through a few of the steps, you know what I mean? And I think, you know what I mean, when I think about it with hindsight, you know what I mean, it was good for me in those early days when I didn't have anything and no understanding of what was really going off. It kept me safe, you know what I mean, being in that environment. And but deep down, you know, I never did believe in the disease concept, you know what I mean, even in those early days. It just felt like, you know what I mean, I was making myself a victim, and I had loads of people, you know what I mean, making excuses for why they're using. Oh, well, I'm an addict, you know what I mean? I've got the disease of addiction. So, you know what I mean, as if like using it for an excuse to relapse. And so I guess that sort of thinking came later on, you know. I was in there for about 10 years, you know what I mean? Like I did all the things, like got a sponsor, worked the steps a few times, got sponsees. I was doing service for NA, and but something wasn't right, you know. I was still, you know, I mean, things still crazy at home. You know what I mean? I was getting in fights with neighbours across the road. I mean, full on fights with, you know what I mean, 3 or 4 of us in the street. 5 years clean. It's like, you know what I mean, this ain't right. You know what I mean, this is not right. Supposed to be working this spiritual program, and I was trying to kill somebody in the street. It was like, no, this is not working out. But, you know, I mean, I was short-tempered, I was angry, I was, you know, I had all these things going off, you know, the depression, and, you know, I thought, this thing, I don't want to live like this. You know what I mean? It felt like I was, not all the time, but, you know what I mean, a lot of the time it felt like I was just white-knuckling it. And I didn't, at that time, I didn't know why. But what happened was when I started working through, how are we doing for time? Yeah, all right, I think.
Fine, yeah.
But as I started to work through this program, and I did a couple of step 4s and 5s, like, you know, I started to, you know, it's the first time I actually spoke to it about my past was really when I was in the treatment centre. They get you to do a step 4 there. I tell you what, I don't know how they don't kill people. They got me to do a step 4, and I was talking about, you know, I had to write down all these things. It was like a confessional for me, you know. I know it's not supposed to be that, but that's what it was, you know what I mean? I was just like putting all these things that had happened to me, and and the thing was, I'd never ever spoke to anybody about being sexually abused, you know what I mean, when I was, I don't know, 12 years old. And I did it in here, you know, in this environment. And you're in a room, you know, you're in a room with about 20 odd young kids, all addicts, you know. And when I was in there, I read through all this stuff, and I remember this guy saying, because you can give a feedback in that. I'm not very good at anyway at that particular time. But this one guy said, "Oh wow, that just sounded like one of those James Cagney films." I tell you what, I don't know how I stayed in my seat. I would have killed him. If I'd have got out of that seat, I wouldn't have been able to stop. You know what I mean? It was like, you know what I mean? How dare you? You know what I mean? It was like, that was, you know what I mean? I was in floods of tears. You know what I mean? And when I get emotional like that, that's when I'm at my most dangerous, because that's when I'm going to lash out. When I do that, when I get emotional, you know, and it's I know that I'm, you know, in a dangerous place. And anyway, this old counsellor came over to me, and he said to me, and it always stayed with me, and I guess that's what kept me on this quest really, was he said to me, he came up and he says, and he'd heard what I shared, like, you know, and he says, "I tell you what, son," he says, "one day," he says, "all this will just be a story." And I thought, "I fucking hope so." You know what I mean? I was so, you know what I mean? I so hung on to those words, because that was like music to my ears. If that could only be true, that this could only be that one day this will only be a story. And so that was it. That was the first time I'd actually spoke about my past. And then I did, you know, step 4s and 5s a couple of times with sponsors. And I came out of that, you know, and I was like, you know, I'll have a drink.
Cheers.
Yeah, I've got ginger or some ginger cordial.
I'm on the corporation pot. Water.
Yeah, sometimes the best. Yeah, so yeah, I was starting to, you know what I mean, I was starting to get a feel into these the step 4 and 5, you know what I mean, that my behaviours were attached to these things from my past. I didn't know what I was going to do with them, but then once I realised, once I was on it, that was it. I was on the hunt, you know? And eventually, I mean, I was well, I don't know, all self-help books. That was the start of it. I don't know how many I've got there. I've got a library, I think. You can only see part of them. And so that was it. You know, I was reading, I was on the internet, I was looking for stuff. And but one of the places I used to get attracted to, because my family life was still far from happy in those first 5, maybe 10 years even, you know, because my behaviours were still off the wall. I was still, you know what I mean, I still had the same beliefs where, you know, from my dad, all you have to do, as long as you go to work and bring a wage home, you know what I mean, everything's okay, you know what I mean, don't worry about anything else. And it was like that sort of mentality, you know, that was causing major problems. I was starting to realise that I had no idea what a relationship was at all, you know what I mean. We had to start from scratch, and but she stuck it out, you know, and so, you know, I mean, we started going out to these mind, body, and spirit events. They have them locally, like, you know, on a local showground near us, and I get drawn to them because I was really feeling the energy around them, I think, you know what I mean, before I knew what it was. I just got a really good feeling when I was in there, but I was looking at these different techniques, where I was using Reiki and sacrocranial stuff and all those sort of things, and but it didn't really draw me to them, but but I was doing meditation, you know, and I wasn't using. I didn't, you know, I had no intentions of using, but I didn't like who I was, you know, and I didn't like that. I wanted to change that. And this one particular day, I came across this lady called, well, I don't matter who she was called, but she was doing a thing called EFT. It's a energy technique, emotional freedom technique. It's just tapping on certain energy point, you know, like the portals of the meridians and that. It's like acupuncture without needles. And I was sort of drawn to her, you know what I mean? It was one of those times, you know what I mean, where I saw her and I went to talk to her, and she had about 2 or 3 people talking to her. And I got not a lot of patience. I don't like queues, you know what I mean? So I was on my way out the door again. And I nearly got to the front door, and I thought, and something says like, you need to go back, you know. And so I did. I said to her, look, just wait a bit longer. I'm gonna have to have a chat with that lady. And I went back to her and I started talking to her. To tell you the truth, you know, I started talking to her, and I said, and she had a list of all these things that this EFT could help with. And I was thinking, that'd be really good for my sponsees, you know what I mean, in NA, you know what I mean, I was mentoring, and then, you know, and then the penny gradually dropped. Maybe it might be good for me. And so I asked her about it, and long story short, really, I signed up with her and went to try some of these strange techniques. I hadn't got a clue about. But then again, when I went to a 12-step program, I didn't have a clue about that either. And I went to see her, and I told her what it was I wanted to work with, and she started working with this tapping technique to resolve childhood trauma. And we just went through them one at a time, and gradually, you know what I mean, they just started to fade away. Until, you know what I mean, at the end of it, like it didn't happen overnight, you know what I mean. This was like over a period of about, I don't know, well, I was definitely feeling the benefits after 4 weeks, 6 weeks, even better, you know what I mean. And then we were clearing up the bits and bobs and the belief systems, you know what I mean, around my negative belief systems and stuff like that. And so I was with her for about 10 weeks. I didn't mind, you know what I mean. I just knew that this was what I'd been looking for, you know. I'm sure there's lots of other things out there, but that was the thing that worked for me. And the you know what I mean, the behaviours. I didn't have to change the behaviours. It was, you know what I mean. It's excuse me. It's almost like when the energy, the trapped energy in the body from these traumas was released. You know what I mean? And I could relax, and I wasn't, you know, running on fight or flight all the time. You know, suddenly, you know, the behaviours started to change. You know, I just started to feel more relaxed. I just had more resilience around certain issues. You know what I mean? I didn't have that. You know what I mean? That not. You know what I mean? It was like that road rage. I had road rage, definitely, you know what I mean? But I had street rage as well, you know what I mean? And any rage, you know, it was like, you know, anybody that wound me up or said something out of order, you know what I mean? I'd go like over the top, where other people would go, oh, dickhead, you know what I mean, and walk off, you know what I mean? It wouldn't be like that for me. I'd be like full on with it, you know, and shouting and bawling, or at least if I wasn't shouting and bawling, I'd be internalising those feelings. You know what I mean? That rage. And this wasn't happening anymore. And the thing was, right, that our marriage was starting to improve. It started to improve before then, but it was improved a lot quicker, you know what I mean, once I'd dealt with this side of it. And she was saying while she was working with me, she says, one thing you're going to notice when you've gone through this stuff, it says your relationships are going to change, not just your relationships at home, but your relationships with everybody. And she was right. You know what I mean? I was like so chilled out with people that normally would have driven me to distraction, and you know what I mean? It was a strange thing, but I mean, because this tapping technique, once you've been shown it, you can do it yourself. So if you find yourself if I found myself in a stressful situation, yeah, I just take myself away. I did it when I was at work. I had some people that I won't particularly get on very well, you know what I mean? But rather than blowing my top, you know what I mean, I'd go to the toilet or something. Like I was going to the toilet, I'd do a bit of tapping for a while, come back out, I'd be all right, be chilled again, like, you know, let go of it. So it was a really good tool for me in that respect. And but what happened was not only did I feel the benefits of it, my wife was so impressed with it, with what she saw in me, that we both got. I ended up getting trained up in it. I went into got up to level 3 EFT practice. I did another thing called matrix reimprinting, and then started working with addicts from NA. It was good because I was part of my training, part of my getting certified was I had to do something like 20 case studies. So all I was doing, like dragging people out of NA meetings, getting them to sit down with me, do a bit of tapping on them, like, you know, because every one of them had aces, all of them, you know what I mean? And I'd found this thing called, just after this, I'd found something called the ACE study, Adverse Childhood Experience study. I don't know whether you've ever heard of it.
I talk about
I thought so.
Okay.
Yeah? Yeah. And as soon as I got that, you know, as soon as I uncovered that, as soon as I discovered that, it was like all the pieces started to fall into place. It was like a jigsaw, and the picture coming to, and it was like everything that I'd felt internally and wasn't sure about. Well, was sure about, you know what I mean, but nobody else seemed to be. You know what I mean? Was shown to be true. You know, it was. So I actually was using the ACE study questionnaire, the 10 questions, on these people from NA, and every one of them, and I'm not joking, you know what I mean, everyone, well, you'll know yourself, but everyone was scoring 7s, 8s, 9s all the time, constantly, you know what I mean, on it. And so I had plenty of work. I had plenty of work on my hands. Look, but it was all for free because none of them had any money. Not many addicts have got money. They've blown it all like I had.
Is that what you...
Sorry?
Did that then become your direction then? Did you leave 12 steps and just solely concentrate on that?
Yeah, I did really, you know what I mean? I've done like 10 years in there doing what's the name. I still, you know what I mean? I've still got lots of friends in NA, and I'll still go in and do a share now and again. I've still got a sponsor, but he likes the same sort of stuff as I do as well. So I still go and see him now and again, like, you know, but yeah, if I get invited to do a share, I go and do a share. But other than that, I'm not working through 12-step programs anymore. I think it served its purpose for me, you know, and it was like it's almost like I've moved to a different platform, you know. But I don't diss it, you know what I mean? I think it was my journey to come that way, you know, and I think it served its purpose in those early years when there wasn't anything else about, you know. I mean, 1997, we had 3 meetings in Nottingham. That was it, you know, and there wasn't anything around there really. There was more AA, but I didn't particularly get on an AA meeting and sort of get the connection there. But yeah, so I got trained up, and my wife got trained up, and I took it a few stages further, and then I started my own business, Real Changes for Life. So and started working with people, because I started off right. When I started this off, I was thinking, when I started my business off, I was thinking, oh yeah, I'll be able to help all these people with addictions and help them so much, you know what I mean? Because I know that this works. I know all the ones that I've come across, you know what I mean, all had the same problems as I did, and the same unresolved childhood stuff. So I knew that, you know what I mean, I knew that that'd be a good way. But what I was doing, I was putting stuff up. I was putting Facebook ads up, and I was doing and I started doing little posts and that. And then I got a lot of people, especially females, not so much males, getting in touch with me and saying, look, I've never had an addiction. Most of them were on prescription drugs, so they didn't recognise it as an addiction, but they didn't see it, you know what I mean, as an addiction as such. But they were still having the same problems, You know what I mean? They were still, they were still anxious uh, and high levels of stress and stress and anxiety, depression, and all the other things that went with it, and a lot of the behaviours as well. Losing their temper and they were suffering with the same sort of things that got me looking for, what the answer was for me. But the other thing about that is, after a period of time, it suddenly dawned on me that what that counsellor had said in that treatment centre about one day this will just be a story actually came true. Because I can look back on all of that. Everything that happened. And it is just a story to me now. It didn't change what's happened. It didn't change. And I tell you about the other thing I wanted to point out as well was, when he said your relationships will change. My mum and dad had passed away some time ago, and I had a massive thing around my dad. Resentments around my dad, and as I started to work through this stuff and let go of the traumas, what came back for me was like, my dad never spoke about his childhood. I ain't got a clue where he came from. I don't know how he was treated. I've got a fairly good idea. But what happened was, all that resentment, all that anger, and all those feelings I had around him, they melted away as well. And what started to happen was, like, all the good memories started to filter to the top. When we used to go fishing together, and I worked on the stations with him. We used to go and watch Walt Disney films and laugh until there was tears coming down our face. All the things that had been blocked out by all the, all the crap was allowed to filter to the top. And I was so, that was so, I can't, I was just filled with gratitude, for allowing that to come back to the surface. And me remember all those good things around my mum and that. I had a thing about my mum. Why would she write a list out and give it to my dad? And, over my behaviours and knowing that I was going to get a good hiding, and, and I was thinking, she's most probably, and my dad as well, he's most probably saw some of the behaviours that I was doing. I'm checking his table. Soon as these behaviours that I was showing, and I bet he was scared for me, because I had the same thing happen with my son. My son started using when I was in recovery. I had to work with him through that, and he got his life together. He's all cool now, and it never got really bad for him. So, loads of brilliant things have happened as a result of it, but it was, it wasn't, I thought it was, all I thought is when I stopped using drugs, everything was going to be hunky-dory. It was going to be, we'll all live happily ever after. But it wasn't a fairy story at all, it's nothing to do. I started, it wasn't till sometimes later I saw the drugs as just a symptom of the problem, and the real problem was the unresolved trauma. So I was only self-medicating. Once I'd come to terms with that, I think I just thought, wow, it's just so, really, it's so simple. But some people will try and make resolving trauma such a frightening thing. And I think if you go to some of the talk therapies, it can be, when they re-traumatise, can do, I'm not saying they all do, but can re-traumatise clients. I've had quite a few people that's come from talk therapies and ended up, and wanted to try something different. And so.
Well, I think
COVID, but the COVID thing put us.
Sorry. It's a bad line, isn't it? Because I keep talking. When I'm talking, it's like a delay. Yeah. No, I was going to say that having listened to your story and listened to the kind of model that you work towards. I mean, this podcast is all about, alternative routes to recovery, basically. So it's not just about 12-step fellowships.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm in 12-step fellowships myself, but I've gone down many different routes of recovery. And I suppose the only difference of opinion slightly that I have with what you've described is because I subscribe to exactly what you've just said. I believe that the underlying trauma is what leads to, you know, a lack of ability to manage our emotions. That then becomes mental health issues. The mental health issues we medicate with the drugs and the, you know, the behaviours. And when they use the word disease, I mean, obviously, like, you know, it's all semantics, isn't it? Because ultimately, disease and illness are the same thing. You know, they're an interchangeable word.
Yeah.
So I do believe that it does become mental illness. I mean, I've got somebody very close to me at the moment, actually, that's suffering with mental illness, and it's primarily anxiety, but there's a bit of depression in there as well. And I can see that person, you know, I can see the illness in that person. That person looks really unwell, and that person will, you know, isn't using anything to medicate themselves, and they're taking the necessary steps to get well. And then at that point, then once you make that decision that you want to get well, it's like, well, what route are you going to go down? And obviously, you did the 12-step route first, and then now you've kind of got, is it ETF? Is it called? Is that right?
EFT, yeah, emotional freedom technique. Yeah.
So yeah, EFT, and I've come across that before many years ago. Actually, somebody was talking to me about it, and I'm so open minded. Honestly, like I believe in all these techniques, and I think that you just got to find what works for you, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It doesn't matter what ultimately works for you, and I think that that's something that, especially within the 12-step fellowships, people kind of become quite institutionalized, and they kind of think, well, you can't do anything else. Like, you can't, and you certainly can't leave. You know what I mean? You can't leave the fellowships, and actually,
No.
It's like
the mafia, isn't it?
Like the mafia, isn't it? Yeah, if you leave, you die. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure they've got a point in the sense that, like, I mean, I said to my partner tonight, actually, I said I would never leave 12-step fellowships. Similarly to you, you know, like, I mean, I've been sober for 10 years, and I know that, you know, I will, like you, no matter what happens in the future, if I was ever asked to go back and do service, I would always go back and do service. And,
yeah,
you know, and I will always be grateful for what 12-step fellowships have given me. But I don't know what the future holds. And I very much, I'm open-minded to these types of things. And, you know, and I related when you were talking about, you know, still feeling angry and still, essentially still having those old behaviors. 100%, I've still got some of those old behaviours. I mean, I'm pretty relaxed most of the time, but if somebody pisses me off, I can go to 0 to 100 very, very quickly. So these are the types of techniques that, you know, I'm really interested in that stuff, and it sounds really, really good.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it works in so many different areas. I mean, I don't want to, you know, I mean, I'm not plugging it. You know what I mean? It's like, it worked for me, and like you said, it's like, I think one of the worst thing addicts have is the closed-mindedness part of it. You know what I mean? When they learn to be more open-minded about things, because I know myself. You know what I mean? A guy used to tell me, he used to quote this saying about contempt prior to investigation, and you know what I mean? I'm so. You know, I mean, it so resonated with me, because that was me. If I didn't know about it, it was a load of bollocks, you know what I mean? And don't even bother, you know what I mean, having a look at it, because it won't work. You know what I mean? I never tried anything. And I wonder, you know, it's like cutting your nose off to spite your face. You know what I mean? I must have cut it off 1,000 times.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is lots of things out there now. And I think, and I was lucky, I think what was lucky for me, when I was in the rooms, they had people that have been around quite a while used to come in and do shares. And they used to come into the 12-step, and they're not supposed to talk about things outside, you know, I mean, outside of NA or AA or whatever. And but what they used to say was, there are plenty of things out there, and it's not about doing. What did you say? Instead of, it's about doing things as well as, you know what I mean? So it's like add-ons. Yeah. You know what I mean? You've got your recovery, you know what I mean? Your 12-step program, if you're working that, you know what I mean? But you can add on to it. You know what I mean? You can put other things on top, and you're not taking anything away from, you know what I mean, from your fellowship. Because a lot of people, they go and try different things, and they also almost feel like they've got to keep it secret. You know what I mean? They can't tell anybody about it, or you know what I mean, they'll be ridiculed if anybody finds out that they're doing anything other than, you know what I mean, what the fellowship is asking. But I think that's changing a lot now. You know what I mean? I think things are a bit more open now.
Yeah, I agree with that. And how did your book come about then? So when did you write that, and what gave you the inspiration to write it?
Well, the inspiration, I don't know whether it was inspiration or desperation, but they're connected. But when the COVID came down, and you know what I mean, I couldn't see people face to face. I didn't particularly want to work online. I didn't get, you know, that connection. I need that connection somehow, you know. And I thought, well, everybody's been on about I ought to write my life story, and so I thought, well, perfect opportunity. So I just put everything down and started writing. And last year, back end of last year, well, about what time did I start? It wasn't long after the lockdown, and then got it released in January.
Beautiful.
So as well.
Is it been published, or did you publish it?
No, it's on Amazon. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah, it's on Amazon, and it's there's an ebook as well as a paperback.
Lovely. So did you get it signed by a publisher?
No, I didn't sign. I got myself an editor. Yeah. You know what I mean? And then and she worked through it with me, and then she could work out how to get it onto Amazon and that, and I just self-published. So. Oh,
cool. Yeah, congratulations. Well, that's really cool. I mean, I've published I've self-published 5 books, and I've just got my first book published, which will be out in summer. So yeah,
have you done a private, a proper publisher then, not through Amazon then, not self-publishing?
Yeah, this was the first one that I actually sent to publishers, because previously I'd done it the same way that you did, and then I made the decision to send this one out, and it got snapped up by a publisher, so it'll be out in
cool.
Yeah.
Nice one, well done.
Thank you.
I loved it. I did. I enjoyed the process.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love writing.
It was definitely therapeutic.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry?
I said I love writing. It's definitely it's very cathartic, isn't it?
Yeah.
What would you say then? What does life in recovery mean to you then?
Life in recovery, easy. It's just freedom for me. You know what I mean? It's just, you know what I mean? It's just like I'm not tied to, you know what I mean? I was always tied to something. You know, it was like, you know, I couldn't go on holiday without checking with me. You know, I got a script, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't be this far away from my dealer, and you know what I mean? I had to turn down jobs. I was lying. You know, the deceitfulness of it all. I mean, I think total freedom. But the thing that I really love about it is that I don't have to lie to anybody about anything, and I lied about everything. You know what I mean? I was just a compulsive liar. I think I used to get up early in the day, in the morning, so I could lie more. You know, I'd lie about things I didn't need to lie about. You know, like I was practicing or something, you know? And, but at the same time, you know what I mean? I hated it. I hated lying all the time. I hated, you know what I mean? Where you been? You know what I mean? I haven't, I've been such and such, you know what I mean? It's like, I hated it. But yeah, freedom. You know what I mean? I've got a nice house. My family's all settled. You know what I mean? And that is, you know what I mean? It's sort of, it's almost like, I believe in energy and so forth, you know what I mean? And I believe they pick up on that energy, and I think they feel more secure and safe. You know what I mean? My children are all grown up. You know, I can be around my grandkids. I don't have to look at my watch. You know what I mean? And I've got to be somewhere. I ain't got to be anywhere. You know what I mean? I can be, I can just spend time with them and we have meals together. I just love all that part of it. You know what I mean? All that, the family stuff, you know what I mean? Being with my kids and, with my grandkids, well, not so much now, but, when it was about being around I was a family man. Deep down, I was a family man and couldn't be one. And now 100% I can be there for them all the time. They want me, you know what I mean? If I say I'm going to do something, never did before, excuse for why I wasn't there or I couldn't make it or I didn't do this or I didn't do that. I've never ever say anything to them now. And if I say, if they ask me to do something, I do it and I'm there. And I love it that I can do that, I'm retired now, so I've got a lot more time on my hands. So.
And typically, if you get a client and they go through the EFT method, how long does it normally take?
Yeah. Well, it depends. I mean, you've got people that might come in. It depends who they are. They might come in and they might have one specific thing that they want to work on. You could do it. You could do it in one session or two. You might have people, like have been through complex trauma, that's gone on for years while they were, and it's going to take longer. But, I think the most I work with people is like 8 weeks, and it's usually about 3 or 4.
Yeah. And how much is
hourly,
it?
That's an hourly session.
How much?
£60.
60 quid, yeah.
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 Beautiful. Well, where can we find you online if we wanted to get a booking or get your book?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. The book is, but I tell you what, you just said that right. I don't think I'll put the book on my website.
What you need to do next?
Yeah. Just reminded me. I thought, bloody hell, if anybody looks on the website, but won't find it.
What's your website address?
Website's www.realchangesforlife.co.uk.
Brilliant. Well, Trevor, thanks very much for your time, mate. It's been a pleasure listening to you and talking to you.
Thanks for inviting me, John.
Wicked. I'll send you the link when it's uploaded, and if you can share it on are you on social media?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can share it on your social media.
Too often.
Yeah. Get a few listens. That'd be great.
Yeah. I will do, definitely.
Take care then.
Thanks, John.
Thanks very
Same to you, mate.
See you later.
Thanks for listening, and if you've been affected by any of the issues discussed in the podcast, please see a range of mutual aid organisations in the show notes. Also, don't forget that you can support the Life in Recovery podcast by visiting patreon.com/lifeinrecovery. Peace and love, and goodbye for now.